When my husband, Mark, passed away, I moved to Whispering Woods. It was a lifestyle community, a polite way of saying it was a kingdom ruled by an HOA board with the temperament of a firing squad. If this helped even a little, subscribing would make my day. The board president was Arthur Vance. He wore cream-colored sweaters and a smile that never reached his eyes. He had a way of standing on his porch, checking his watch to see if you were home past the noise curve. He treated the neighborhood like a controlled experiment. He didn't realize I was the one who designed the The winter storm of 2025 was a black swan event. The grid collapsed. The temperature in my living room dropped to 38 degrees. I had Mark's old backup generator, an industrial-grade beast kept in a sound-dampened shed I'd built to see. I turned it on to keep the pipes from freezing. 3 hours later, there was a pounding on my door. It wasn't a neighbor asking for warmth. It was Arthur and 2 compliance officers in reflective vests. "Eleanor," Arthur said, his voice a chilling monotone. "The vibration from your unit is exceeding the 45 decibel limit. It's an unapproved modify, cation. We're seizing it for the safety of the neighborhood." "It's -5 degrees, Arthur," I whispered. "If you take that, my house dies." Compliance is not optional. It's for the collective good. They didn't just take it. They cut the copper fuel lines, letting the gas spill onto the snow. A hazmat violation they later fined me $2,000 for. They hauled my warmth away into the WHIT void. I spent that night wrapped in wool coats, shivering until my teeth chipped. But as the cold seeped into my bones, something snapped. The QA part of my brain, the part that calculates failure points, took over. I realized Whispering Woods wasn't a community. It was a system, and every system has a critical flaw. When the snow melted, I didn't sue. I went to the hardware store. I bought a laser level, a soil density tester, a drone with a thermal camera, and the International Building Code. A BEGA, and the audit. I started walking. Every morning at 5 a.m., I looked at the weep holes in the brickwork. I noticed Arthur's foundation was weepin. A crystalline white powder called efflorescence was blooming at the base. To a normal person, it's salt. To a QA inspector, it's a slow motion disaster. I deployed the drone at 2 a.m. The thermal images were a horror show. The community's 20-foot retaining wall was glowing orange in the infrared spectrum. It was saturated with water. It was leaning. It was failing. I went deeper. I intercepted a discarded error log from a shredding truck. Arthur had been keeping a second set of books on encrypted USB drives hidden inside a Clubhouse smoke detector. I knew it was there because detector number 14 drew 0.5 milliamps more power than the others. Parasitic draw. A signal. I waited for the annual general meeting. Arthur stood at the podium, gloating about new uniformity fines. He okayed at me and smirked. "I hope you've learned the rules apply to everyone, Eleanor." I stood up. I didn't have a SP. I had a projector. "Arthur," I said, my voice echoing with metallic precision, "I've performed a quality assurance audit. Let's look at the data." I flashed the first slide. The retaining wall. This wall is rated for 5,000 pounds of pressure. It is currently under 7,200. The rebar is oxidizing. The concrete is honeycombing. Arthur laughed. You're a widow with a hobby. Sit down. I'm a senior QA lead for Lockheed Martin, Arthur. I spent 30 years ensuring satellites don't fall out of the sky. No. Let's look at the finances. I flipped to the next slide. The company you hired to reinforce this wall is a shell company registered to your brother-in-law. You paid him $300,000. He didn't use grade 60 rebar. He used rusted screw. I have the metallurgy samples. The room went cold. The wall is going to fail, Arthur. And because you bypassed the county inspector, the insurance policies for every house in this room are void. We aren't covered for gross negligence. Suddenly, a low, guttural groan vibrated through the floor. It was the sound of 200 tons of earth deciding it no longer wanted to stay behind a cheap, fraudulent wall. One more thing, I said, clicking to a photo of a hidden pipe. You've been bypassing the sewage line for 10 years, dumping your household waste into the pristine lake our dogs swim in to save $200 a month. The neighbors began to gag. Arthur lunged for the laptop. You can't prove that. Illegal search. Actually, I leaned in. As a member of the Architectural Review Committee, a position I assumed after you failed to respond to my applicati, on within the 30-day statutory limit, I have right of entry for environmental hazards. Section 4.2 of your own bylaws. You used the rules to bully me. I used the rules to build a cage for you, and the door just locked. The wall liquefied. The hillside moved 6 feet toward Arthur's master bedroom. His $2 million mansion, built on Fr. Odulent fill dirt, began to groan and split. Arthur was sentenced to 12 years in federal penitentiary. The generator seizure was actually a scheme to sell my industrial unit on the black market to cover his gambling debts. 6 months later, in my new home 3 states away, my phone buzzed. A new board member at Whispering Woods was trying to find me for unforwarded mail. I didn't get angry. I didn't call a lawyer. I simply opened my laptop, typed in the new board member's adder, SS, and pulled up the satellite topography maps. Let's see, I whispered, my fingers hovering over the keys. I wonder if your roof is in spec. The audit never ends. If this helped even a little, subscribing would make my day. Elena. Thorne didn't sleep much after the night they took her generator. In the aerospace industry, if a part fails, people die. In Whispering Woods, if the system failed, Arthur Vance got rich. Elena decided to treat the entire neighborhood like a faulty fuselage. She started with the clubhouse. While the board was busy fine-tuning the aesthetic harmony codes, Elena was monitoring the clubhouse's electrical meters. She noticed a parasitic draw, a steady pull of 1.2 kilowatts that shouldn't have been there after hours. Using a FLIR thermal imaging camera, she traced the heat signature through the clubhouse walls. It led to a locked utility closet. She didn't break the lock. She simply used her right to inspect life safety equipment as a resident. Inside, she found a server rack. Arthur wasn't just managing the HOA. He was running a private crypto mining rig using the community's shared electricity. The cost, $14,000 in diverted utility funds over 18 months. Elena logged it, time-stamped the thermal drift, and moved to the main event. The retaining wall was the neighborhood's spine, and Elena knew it was fractured. She returned to the wall at 3 a.m. with an ultrasonic pulse velocity tester, a device used to find voids in aircraft wings. As she moved the sensor along the base of the 20-foot stone behemoth, the readings came back hollow. Arthur's brother-in-law hadn't just used cheap rebar. He had used air-entrained waste. Fill. Instead of solid, high-PSI concrete, the center of the wall was filled with construction debris, dirt, and empty soda cans. It was a shell. Elena took a core sample using a handheld diamond drill. When the cylinder of concrete popped out, it crumbled in her hand like wet cake. She placed the debris in a sterile bag. Tolerance check, she whispered to the empty dark. Failure point, imminent. Every criminal has a security blanket. The one place where they keep the truth to ensure they don't get cheated by their own accomplices. For Arthur, it was a physical blue binder. Elena found it through pure QA methodology. Observation of habit. Every Friday at 4 p.m., Arthur's brother-in-law, Steve, would meet Arthur at the community dumpster. They weren't throwing away trash. They were swapping the binder. Elena rigged a motion-activated high-def camera in the treeline. She caught 3 weeks of handoffs. On the 4th week, she waited until Steve dropped the binder into his truck bed and went into the clubhouse to use the restroom. Elena moved with the silent efficiency of a technician. She didn't steal the binder. She used a portable high-speed document scanner. The contents were a horror show of line item shredding. The pool fund, $50,000 diverted to consulting fees, Arthur's offshore account. The winter prep fund, $20,000 for salt and plowing that was never purchased, explaining why the roads were death traps during the blizzard. The generator bounty, a list of serial numbers for high-end generators seized from residents, including Elena's, with sold notations next to them on an auction site. The annual meeting wasn't just a confrontation. It was a structural integrity test. Elena stood in the back, her black suit sharp enough to cut glass. When Arthur tried to silence her, she didn't argue. She simply pulled out a tablet and synced it to the clubhouse's own sound system, which she had serviced earlier that morning. The sound of the retaining wall groaning, captured by her buried seismic microphones, filled the room. It sounded like the world was ending. Arthur. Elena's voice was a low, resonant frequency. I'm not here as a concerned neighbor. I'm here as the person who just sent a 400-page nonconformance report to the FBI, the EPA, and the state insurance commissioner. Arthur's face turned the color of spoiled milk. You're delusional, Elena. That's just wind in the pipes. No, she said, clicking a button. The screen showed the blue binder scans. That's the record of you selling my dead husband's generator for $1,200 to a guy in Ohio. That's the record of the trash fill in our retaining wall. And that, she pointed to the ceiling as a massive crack snaked across the drywall, is the sound of the factor of safety reaching zero. The wall didn't just break. It exploded. The hydrostatic pressure of the trapped rainwater finally overcame the friction of the dirt. A 50-foot section of the hill surged forward, burying the community pool and Arthur's pristine Lexus in 6 feet of mud and Vance construction debris. The clubhouse shook. People screamed. Arthur tried to run for the emergency exit, but Elena stood in his way, clipboard in hand. Wait, Arthur, she said, perfectly calm as the building groaned. You haven't signed the inspection log. As the FBI led Arthur away in handcuffs, stepping over the ruined remains of the Aesthetic Harmony sign, Elena Thorne stood on the only piece of ground that hadn't shifted. She had calculated the slide radius perfectly. Her house was untouched. A month later, the entire community was declared a total loss by the insurance companies due to the gross negligence documented in the Thorne audit. The residents received massive payouts thanks to her evidence. Arthur received a 15-year sentence in a maximum security facility. In his cell, Arthur eventually received a package. It was a single laminated sheet of paper. No letter, no gloating, just a QA technical specification for a standard prison cell door, with one tiny red circle around the hinge. Underneath, in Elena's precise handwriting, it read, Check the tolerances, Arthur. They always fail eventually. The trapped rats. Mike and Daryl thought they were safe because they were just following orders. They were wrong. Elena knew that in any manufacturing disaster, the person who signs the inspection tag is just as liable as the CEO. She tracked them to a local bar 2 weeks after the arrest. She didn't walk in with a badge. She walked in with a laptop. She sat down at their booth, the light from the screen reflecting off her glasses like cold steel. If this helped even a little, subscribing would make my day. The generator you took from me had a GPS transponder embedded in the housing, Elena said, her voice dropping the temperature in the booth by 10 degrees. I know you didn't sell it. You kept it at Mike's cabin in the woods. But more importantly, I have the audio from the night you cut the lines. She pressed play. Just cut the damn thing, Arthur said. He's got a buyer. If she freezes, she freezes. Daryl's voice rang out clear as a bell. That's conspiracy to commit grand larceny and premeditated endangerment, Elena noted, checking a box on her digital tablet. I've already submitted the audio to the district attorney, but I'm a QA professional. I prefer to offer a corrective action plan before I scrap the part. To save their own skins, Mike and Daryl became Elena's personal forensic team. Under her direction, they spent 3 weeks digging through the literal mud of the collapsed hillside. Elena was looking for the black box, the HOA's physical backup server that Arthur had supposedly lost in the slide. She had calculated the trajectory of the clubhouse collapse using a fluid dynamics model. Dig there. She pointed to a spot 40 feet from the original foundation. 5 feet down, you'll find a waterproof Pelican case. They found it. Inside wasn't just the financial records, but a collection of compliance files on every resident. Arthur had been blackmailing half the neighborhood. He had photos of private conversations, records of personal struggles, and even health data he'd illegally obtained from a board member who worked at the local clinic. The community was in shambles, but Elena was now the de facto receiver. She used the evidence in the Pelican case to force the HOA's insurance carrier into a $25 million global settlement. She didn't use the money for pretty flowers. She hired a geotechnical engineering firm to install smart retaining walls with fiber optic sensors that detect soil movement in millimeters. She replaced the aesthetic harmony codes with structural integrity codes. She mandated that every home be equipped with an industrial-grade solar hybrid backup system. The final piece of the audit was the generator itself. Mike and Daryl returned it to Elena's driveway on a rainy Tuesday. It was scratched, the lines were mangled, and the casing was dented. To a normal person, it was junk. To Elena, it was a non-conforming unit. She spent 48 hours in her garage. She didn't just repair it. She upgraded it. She machined custom titanium fittings for the fuel lines. She rewired the internal combustion timing to run at a 98% efficiency rate. She installed a remote kill switch that could be activated by a voice command. 6 months later, Elena visited the state penitentiary. She sat behind the glass, looking at Arthur. He looked hollow. The cream-colored sweater was gone, replaced by a rough orange jumpsuit that was 3 sizes too big. The prison is over capacity, Arthur, Elena said into the phone. The HVAC system is running at a 30% deficit. The fire suppression system hasn't been tested since 2022. Arthur stared at her. Why are you here? To gloat? No, Elena replied, her eyes scanning the structural joints of the visiting room. I'm here to tell you that I bought the debt for this facility's maintenance contract. I am now the lead quality auditor for the State Department of Corrections. She leaned closer to the glass. I noticed the lock on your cell door has a mechanical tolerance issue. It sticks if the humidity hits 80%. And according to my weather forecast, it's going to be a very humid summer, Arthur. She stood up, clicked her pen, and tucked her clipboard under her arm. Compliance is not optional, she whispered, and you are officially out of spec. As she walked away, the sound of her heels on the linoleum floor sounded exactly like a ticking clock. Elena Thorne didn't just win. She became the system that Arthur could never escape. If this helped even a little, subscribing would make my day.